he had drawn a picture of the governor on the side of a milk carton. So he left in a car, and the rest of us got stuck there, and they didn't want us to leave.
I was expecting a worldwide assignment. I was hoping for Paris or London, maybe Tokyo, and I got Des Moines, Iowa.
We appreciate all three of you joining us today, especially Peter. This is your second time speaking with us on the pod, but we also welcome Mary and Liz. Altogether, you have created the Trade Director Diaries. We welcome you, and let's get started.
All right. Well, to kick it off, how about telling us each a little bit about yourselves and your background and how you got involved in international trade?
I'm a native Mississippian. I got involved in international trade just out of college when I was supposedly destined to be a teacher. And I decided that I couldn't stand children. And so I went to work in the international division of a regional bank in Memphis, Tennessee. And then I moved from one job to the next and just progressed. And then I got a call from Thad Cochran, who was then a member of the House from Mississippi and D.C. And he hired me because I didn't know anything about politics. He hired me to go to D.C. and represent him on foreign relations committees, et cetera, and handle international relations, do all his embassy work and that type of thing. And so I got a background in protocol there. And then I got a call from the state of Mississippi to come and initiate an international trade program for Mississippi. So I said, I'll come for a year, however many. I was there for 34 years before I retired, and worked for 7 different governors, arranging their overseas trips and setting up appointments for them, hosting all international visitors that came into the state, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the division just grew and grew, and we added some foreign offices, and I got involved at the national level with the international trade directors organizations, and I've just been in it this whole time. So it's been a great career for me. I retired about 8 years ago. I think it's been about 8 years. I never can remember. And since then, I have been sitting on my porch drinking wine and just enjoying my retirement.
Well, how about you, Mary?
I worked in state government in a number of positions before I actually got into international trade. I was their legislative liaison, and I worked for various governors. But when one particular person became governor, Tommy Thompson, he really wanted to expand international development in the state of Wisconsin. So I didn't set out my career to be an international. I was an agricultural economist, and I just happened to apply for the job to be an international. And when I first started, I was an international, the person that handled Canada and Mexico. So, very not basic, but we weren't doing much of anything with them. So I learned on the job versus some people that learn ahead of time. And we grew international, our program in Wisconsin, going from like a handful of people to having, 10 people working in the state as well as overseas trade offices. So it was, and I did the same thing Liz did. I organized all the governor's trade missions. I oversaw this, myself. I traveled across Canada and I did trade shows there and in Mexico in the beginning. So I got that on out in the field kind of working with companies. And then we just, kind of grew it. We did a lot of trade missions from Wisconsin over the years. Tommy Thompson was the ultimate cheerleader for Wisconsin. So that was a great time, and I truly love my time. I've been retired now since 2011, but I had a little consulting business, and I worked specifically with just one company, helping them expand their international connections. So until again, Peter got a hold of Liz and I. and say, come on, let's write a book. So that's how I got back into doing this.
For me, it was family, right? My mom was Canadian. The cool thing about that is my mom had these amazing Canadian cousins who were very internationally focused. I had one cousin who was a teacher and taught for the UN all over the world. His kids were the same age as me, so they'd come visit us in New York, and I'd hear these funny accents and see their funny clothes, and I knew when they came, I had to go get the New York Times. I had to really read up on what was going on because they are very global in their outlook. So that kind of was the spark that got me into this field. It wasn't until I went to my undergraduate degree at George Washington University in DC that I took my first Intro to International Business course. And that's when it clicked for me. That's when I realized this is what I want to do. This is really, I love the aspect of having, so many things that you have to know, a little bit about law, culture, protocol, marketing, there's languages, there's so many, there's never the same thing twice as we talked about in our last podcast. So that really helped me get into the field. I joined the U.S. Department of Commerce as an international trade specialist at a grad school. And I was expecting a worldwide assignment. I was hoping for Paris or London, maybe Tokyo. And I got Des Moines, Iowa. Right? That's how I know Iowa so well.
Lucky you.
Thank you. Great. We're learning.
Yeah.
Yes. And at first I was not happy about it coming from New York City, but I embraced it and I had a really great experience there. I got to I liked the policy aspect of trade, but I really liked working in the field. I liked working with the companies. And that's where I felt I had an impact, right? So I spent a couple years in Iowa, got promoted to the Colorado office, and while I was there, I got to meet Governor Mike Sullivan from Wyoming, and he offered me, like Liz, he offered me a job to start the international trade program for Wyoming, which I thought, well, that'll be a challenge. But it was an amazing experience. Charming statesman, easy to staff overseas, very listened, cared about my training and knowledge and listened to it. And not every governor did that in all our experiences, of course. But I didn't realize how lucky I was. So that's how I got on the path. I basically started there. I gained this sort of expertise in turnarounds, right? Once I got involved in the National Association, I got a number of opportunities to work for states where they needed some help. At the end, I finally realized, I got a little tired of the different changes, so I thought, this might be a time to pursue academia. I've always liked teaching part-time international business and international trade, and that's how I was offered the job at Mount Hood Community College here in Portland to teach. I'm a full-time economics instructor there, and that's where I got the idea to write the book and to get us all, talking more about trade and the importance of training our next generations on how trade policy should work.
Peter, your idea about this book came about from all of us with our other trade directors when we would get together over a glass of wine, and we always said when we retired we were going to write a book about trade missions. So we waited till we were retired from our respective jobs, and then we wrote the book.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah, back in 2023, when you talked to us last, Peter, you left us an incredible story about a trade experience in Japan. And we were really eager to hear some more case studies from Mary and Liz in terms of what makes a good trade mission and maybe what can go topsy-turvy in a trade mission.
Everything in the world can go wrong and usually does.
The
Especially
thing with the trade mission is, I was just going to say, you need to be prepared. I mean, we know that we need to be prepared, and we need to research where we're going. We need to, work with the Foreign Commercial Service in these different posts where we're headed to. We need to know what's going on with the economy, with the business world. I mean, that's really important, and we need to be really organized. And spend a good deal amount of time getting ready and getting these companies ready to go on a trade mission. But you also have to, and one of the things that we did in Wisconsin, we always did these pre-mission briefings, and we brought in experts from the university, and we would have a day-long, usually a full day, of information and professors, or maybe it could be somebody in, from a company that knew that market, and they would talk to these companies, and we would prepare briefing books so that they knew what was really going on when they were going to get to this market, and the people that were going, we vetted them to make sure that they actually had a product that they could go on the mission and be successful. But the other thing, and Liz can talk about this too, you need to be flexible, because once you get to a market, a country, things happen. So for me, we had so many missions to talk about, and I could talk about a number of them, but one of the ones that stands out to me right now is when we did Eastern Europe. We were going to the Czech Republic and Hungary, and then on into Russia. And this was in 1993. So there's a lot of things going. We could sell things to Russia. It was open, but it was still not a market economy. And one of the things that got us to go to Moscow was Miller Brewing Company from Wisconsin got a concession, I guess you'd call it, to sell Miller beer in Moscow. So the governor was going to do a promotion for them, basically. And in Red Square, we had a Miller truck, and the governor, taking a picture with the Kremlin behind it so that they could use that to promote. So that was like the really cool side about that trip. But it was also at a time when the Russian president, Yeltsin, wanted to make over Russia into more of a market economy. And lots of anti-Yeltsin protesters from the parliament, the government, didn't like that. So they barricaded themselves into the White House. They call it the Russian White House, but it's where and we were in another country, and the Foreign Commercial Service said, "Oh, come on over. Everything's fine here in Russia." So we went, and it was a very scary time. We saw tanks going down the streets. You didn't go off and do anything on your own. You were very, and it was scary. And our companies, we were like, okay, well, we can maybe do this, and we did it. So again, something we weren't prepared for, the companies weren't prepared for, and we ended up having, I think at the time, a successful mission. Right now, I would say I have no idea if any of those companies, after all this time, what they could even be doing there. And I don't think you'd want to be trying to go to Russia. I don't think you can go to Russia. We got too many embargoes and things going on. So very different time, but we kind of rolled with it, and we got through it and got out of there safe and sound. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, we had, of course, in Mississippi, about 96% of all business is small business. So we were traveling with really small companies. And so we had to qualify every lead. Every appointment, we had to make sure that there was business on the table for these small companies to make the investment of time and money to travel and meet with these potential agents, distributors, brokers, importers, end users, whomever it was. But we worked a lot with the local chambers of commerce, the foreign chambers of commerce in the cities where we were. We worked with universities. We worked with a lot of different organizations. But the commercial service really was our anchor while we were there, and we depended on them for a lot of the services that we passed along to the companies. And, one of the things, there's so many things that happen, anything can happen, and it usually does. And it seemed like the most bizarre things that happened to us in Mississippi. I think I don't know if it was the companies that were on the trip or just bad luck or what. But, even before, we didn't have cell phones, so we didn't have any way to communicate with these companies. Right. And we might have, 15 or 20 companies to keep up with. So we tried to do things like arrange for all the appointments to be held in a specific location so that the buyers would come to our company, so we could keep our eyes on them during the day, make sure they were in the room where they were supposed to be. But we had a lot of really crazy things happen. I know that. But we also had, we would also try to use any connections that we had in state to try to further our business overseas. And in Mississippi, we had the president of newly elected president of Honduras, Rafael Callejas, who was a graduate of Mississippi State University and stayed very involved with the university. Both his children were in school at the university. His entire cabinet was made up of Hondurans that had graduated from Mississippi State University. Wow. And he came in, and we had companies come in, and it was a really nice experience. But any connection that you could get, you tried to use to your advantage. Right. The Honduran president led us into an entire program of work that we had not been in, which included all of the Central American countries. He wanted everybody in all the Central American, and they were newly elected heads of state for these countries. And they were actually the first democratically elected leadership in Central America. There was a wave of it that occurred with Violeta Chamorro. I mean, just these incredible figures that are prominent in history now. And that led us to El Salvador. And I got to El Salvador 3 days before my governor was to arrive and my companies. And the first night I was there, the most recent ceasefire, they have 10-year, 20-year, 30, 40-year wars in El Salvador. And the most recent ceasefire in their current 10-year war collapsed the first night that I was there, and I did not know it. And I was out on the balcony of my room reading, and I got a call from downstairs that said, "Get under your bed." And I had noticed lights out there, but I thought it was, fireworks or something, but it was gunshots. And so I spent that night under the bed and trying to call back to Mississippi to tell my governor, "Do not come here." And I finally got through to security at the governor's mansion in the middle of the night, and they woke the governor up, and the governor said, "I don't care, I'm going anyway." So I'm like, "Oh, great, now I have to stay here." So we spent 3 days literally in a war zone. I had to go to the embassy. I had to get Marine security for the governor. It was pretty much a nightmare. We had dinner at the president's home, and the swimming pool in the backyard was just a big hole from grenades, and there were bullets in the wall of the dining room where we were eating. It was an extremely anxious situation. But sometimes it was the companies would do things that would just make a mess of the whole thing. I had a guy who stayed behind to meet with a company that he had just met through I don't know whom, but he stayed behind and said, "I'll catch up with you later." And he didn't catch up. And then finally I heard from him, and he had almost been kidnapped. And he had been taken to this farm somewhere where they had like jaguars and I don't know, all kinds of wild animals roaming around, and he thought he was going to get killed. They had guns. It was just, all kinds of crazy stuff happens. But I think you have to just roll with it. You just have to roll with it and try to make the best of whatever situation comes up and try to keep it as quiet as possible. If you do have some kind of disaster brewing in the background, just keep a smile on your face and don't let on that, things are happening that shouldn't be happening. But I think the best one ever, and this is Peter's favorite, is that we had a governor who was very independent-minded, and there was a mission to Europe. And at the end of the mission, the governor came over to the staff. We were at the airport ready to leave and go back to Mississippi. And we'd been in Europe for 2 weeks. And the governor just got up from his chair at the airport and said, "I'll see y'all later," and walked away. And we had no idea where he went or what he was doing or anything. And apparently there was only one security guy that he had confided in but none of the officials, no one else in the mission had any idea where he was or what he was doing. And of course, when we landed the plane in Mississippi, the press was there to talk to the governor, and we just had to say, we don't know where he is. So that started this incredible press frenzy in Mississippi because the lieutenant governor had not been notified, and he, supposedly was the acting governor if the governor is not in the state, and he had not been notified. And everybody was trying to get in touch with our travel agents to find, and nobody would talk to him, and we didn't have any idea where he was. And then about 10 days or 2 weeks after that, he showed up on a plane from Paris to Memphis with his high school sweetheart, who was not his wife. And there was a reporter from the Memphis newspaper on the plane. And so by the time they landed in Memphis, it was all over Mississippi and the media and everywhere that he had showed up with this woman from Paris, who he had supposedly been with for 10 days to 2 weeks. And so in the meantime, while he was lost, everybody was looking for him and trying to get information. And it became sort of I don't know if it was a national story, but I know it was at least Southeast U.S. It was a story that we had a missing governor. And our cartoonist for our statewide newspaper put a cartoon in the newspaper, and it had he had drawn a picture of the governor on the side of a milk carton. Said, "Have you seen this governor? If so, call the Mississippi Highway Patrol. He's missing." It was pretty funny. And from that point on, the entire time that he was governor, and he served 2 terms, he was in the cartoonist. Every time he drew him with a beret on that said, "I love Paris" on it. And it just became this huge
that was
joke
a story that all governors knew about. Yeah. Yeah. My governor, Tommy Thompson, at the time knew that story, so this wasn't something that was kept secret from other governors. So yeah,
there's no way to keep
we
it
never lost
secret.
Tommy. No.
Yep.
No.
We all thought we had the best stories until we get together with Liz and and Liz
yeah,
we thought we had challenges with our governors and our situation, our legislators, but oh my goodness, Mississippi and Louisiana took the cake. It was always very entertaining and kind of like therapeutic for us because no one really got what we did, back at home. We had a very specialized, career.
Yeah, you really did.
Well,
I mean,
one of the things I was just going to say, Liz was talking about the connections that you have, that you use from in-state. And when we did trade missions to Japan, India, Russia, usually there was those particular ones, there was either a group in Wisconsin that wanted the governor to go there or an individual. And I had it happen to me. I had it happen in Russia. I had it happen in India, and I had it in Japan, where you got there and you maybe had a schedule, and this other person who had influence took over. And I mean, you couldn't do anything. They took the governor off someplace and they did something, and you just, okay. And it was, again, you had to roll with those things. And fortunately, we didn't lose our governor, but there was times when it was... back to Russia. I just remember this story is that we had hired a security guard. So we had the governor's security went along, but they can't have guns or anything. They travel, but they just their companion. And we hired a Russian, I don't know where we got him from, probably the commercial service said, here's a company, hire this guy. He'll sit outside the governor's door and he'll, make sure he's okay. The governor walks out of his room and I don't know, like at night, and he said, "You're fired. I don't want you here. Go away." So he fired his security guard. I know, at the hotel in Moscow. And I think it was because he wanted to go off with some of his buddies and gamble, because lots of casinos. So, I mean, some things you had no control over, and you just kind of had to say, okay, I got to deal with my companies too and make sure they're okay.
Well, Mary, didn't the governor abandon you in Russia and leave you? Wasn't that part of the story?
Oh, well, yeah, he didn't want to stay in Russia. So, well, he abandoned us in the city of Dubna, where we had to take a bus to get to a former nuclear power center. And he said, I'm not staying here, Mary. So he left in a car, and the rest of us got stuck there, and they didn't want us to leave. The mayor of the city said, I tried to say, okay, we need to go. It's snowing. We have a plane tomorrow. We have a 2-hour bus ride. And he said, you will stay. Okay.
So
And
now you're hostages.
there was a,
Admission hostages.
I know, that we were hostages. And then this one woman who had, um, we had a sister city relationship with the city that we were in, and she went to the mayor and she said, no, we need to let these people go. They need to get back to their hotel. And then they allowed us to leave. So yeah, we were supposed to leave the hotel at, I think, like 5 a.m. to go catch our flight. I got down there really early. People were down there like at 3 o'clock in the morning, like ready to leave Moscow.
Can't blame them,
Out of
right?
here.
You know,
I think-
another thing
Anyway.
about trade missions, as time went by, we got to know each other. A lot of the trade directors got to know each other really well, and we were meeting on a fairly regular basis, and so we were sharing a lot of best practices, and that was helping everybody. And then we
Yeah.
decided that maybe we should join together and split the costs on some of these more costly missions. And so we did that. And several, sometimes it was just two states that got together that had the same interest geographically for business reasons, or it was, maybe a couple of states that were really strong in the same industry sectors that were going to compete anyway. So they might as well go together over there and wherever it was and promote their products. So that's one thing that came during the period of time when I was trade director in Mississippi. We began to do a lot of things collectively with other states. And I know in the Southeast U.S., we started an organization, we called it SUS, Southeast U.S. It's Southeast U.S. states. There were like 6 states that joined together. And then we did a lot of activities together, trade promotion activities, and a lot of educational activities together. Because if you got to bring a specialist in from somewhere to talk about a specific topic or a specific market or whatever, you might as well share that information with, companies that are, 3 hours away. And so anyway, I think a lot of best practices were initiated. A lot of that did not exist before we started these really active trade promotion programs. I know in Mississippi, when I first got there, our primary export was agriculture. We had hardly any manufactured exports. And we didn't have a lot of value-added industries either. So, we were selling a lot of raw materials, and we really needed more value-added products. And that's really something that we worked with the universities and the companies to develop. So,
Well, Liz, you mentioned these regional groups. We were a part of the Council of Great Lakes Governors, and the governors had an international interest. So they started doing some joint trade missions. And they also had, we started and we had our first joint trade office overseas. We started that, Ohio got us, it said, does anybody want to share a trade office in Brazil? So I'm like, I raised my hand, we'll share an office with you. And so we got a couple of other states, and we were able, like Liz said, we were able to do a lot more because we had other states a part of it and we could share the cost. And those offices, now I'm trying to remember when those all started, but we've been in touch with the Council of Great Lakes Governors. They are still doing trade missions. They still share trade offices and best practices. And it was phenomenal. And we were the first ones that did all that, and you did it in the South. And I think we learned that collaboration with other states on trade was like the best thing that you could possibly do. And we taught each other, and we did training sessions. And I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but the three of us were instrumental sitting in Washington, D.C. at the Dubliner during a snowstorm and said, we need to start our own organization of national trade directors. And, that eventually became an organization called the State International Development Organizations, or CITO. And that was in 2000, I think. And it is still going on. I talked to them yesterday. They're still having meetings. And I think there's a couple people that might remember us. Some of us don't quite remember us, but they're still doing the same thing, and it's partnering and sharing these ideas, and you don't have to recreate the wheel. Like Peter said, we did a road show. Other states start doing our road show, and that's what I think we started that. And I think it still makes you real proud that it's still going on.
Yep.
And I just talked to the Wisconsin guy that's kind of like the new me. I talked about CITO, and he said, thank you for starting that organization. He said, I have learned so much from going to those meetings. And our good friend from Maine is still on the board, Wade Barrett. And so he said, but this is what it's all about. And I think that made us all better at our jobs because we could share this with each other.
The only degrees in international business initially came from South Carolina and Thunderbird in Phoenix. And Thunderbird would bring us in every year and would teach classes. And CITO, a lot of us sent our staff people out to Phoenix for training, for international trade specialist training. And then we, as directors, provided the training. We, whatever was our specialty or whatever we were, we could teach, we went out and taught those classes. And that was a huge service for international trade programs because there were very few candidates out there to hire for staff that had a background that was fitting for this kind of work. And of course, now everybody's offers an international business degree, but I still think that those hands-on, very specialized training sessions were just very, very worthwhile. I know just about everybody on my staff that I sent out there has been a trade director somewhere. And I've been in touch with my office in Mississippi, my CITO representative and trade director. I talked to her yesterday. She was on my staff when I left, when I retired, and she's now running that department. And they had a CITO meeting, like Mary said, they had a CITO meeting last week, and that organization is going to end up probably providing the most influence over whatever budget cuts come, because they'll have all of those governors will hopefully get on board to support their international trade programs. And that brings us around to federal programs, which I'll let Peter talk about those.
Yeah, I think who knew when we created CITO it was this legacy would still be here today. And they invited us all back, I think back in 2020 or 2022.
2021.
2021, okay. And they actually had us, give a panel, which is kind of cool. But it's a good legacy, and the training is critical, the sharing of best practices. We have all these, Mary's idea of the road show, I took that to North Carolina, I've taken it to New York. They're still, Pennsylvania, they're still doing it. And it's, it's a great way to help small, medium-sized companies break into the market and to train, the next generation on international trade topics. Yeah.
The other area that we expanded into was international protocol. And we were receiving a lot of visitors from overseas. And of course, every time a new governor comes into office, the foreign consulate network has to send a representative to the inauguration, and they have to present their credentials to the governor and that kind of thing. And we didn't really have anybody that was trained in protocol, so we opened our program and initiated a protocol office. And it was as simple as I just got some business cards printed that said Director Protocol Office and put them out there and said, okay, I gave them to Marcia and said, this is your job now. You're our protocol officer. And then she joined the International Protocol Officers Association. And then that opened up a whole world of people to us. Because these were people who were like, handling the Queen's Jubilee, and activities like that. And so we got exposure to all these different events all over the world that we didn't even know. I mean, we didn't have any contacts at all with respect to protocol. So that was a huge increase for us in the number of foreign visitors that we had coming in, and that only helped us build business relationships, because this is all about relationships. That's what it's all about.
Thanks for listening to part 1 of our conversation with Peter Cunningham, Mary Regel, and Liz Cleveland. In part 1, we heard stories and insights from their time on the front lines of international trade. In part 2, we'll highlight what history has made clear. Isolationist policies haven't worked, and they won't work now. With sweeping changes unfolding in federal policy, we turn to our economists to make sense of today's rapid shifts and what those shifts mean for trade, trust, and the future of our international relationships. See you then.
Thanks for tuning in to Can I Get a Retake, a podcast by Great River Learning. If you liked the episode, show your support by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. For detailed show notes and transcripts, visit greatriverlearning.com. Can I Get a Retake is brought to you by hosts Michelle Manaman and Deanna Plussel. Our show is produced and edited by Michaela Albee and Maggie Christensen. Artwork for the podcast is crafted by Michelle Manaman. Our intro music is courtesy of Comma Media. We'll be back soon with another captivating chat with a top GRL educator.